So yesterday, I made some tweets about Astralis' six-tournament run, their first six tournaments with Glaive, and I compared that to SK's six-tournament run when they had that SK era period between and including the two major wins from MLG Columbus to ESL One Cologne 2016, obviously. Okay, that period. And that sort of comparison was just to invite the quality of Astralis' wins thus far to SK's era. So like to suggest, to highlight the possibility that Astralis are in their era. Now, in the aftermath of their IEM Katowice win, which just happened today, no one I think is ready to call this era the Astralis era yet. I think people are still gun shy about that because of the looming possibility of these other strong teams like Fnatic trying to get back to their old level. G2, this new phase team, what North can do with AZ, all that jazz going down. So I don't think people are ready to call it the Astralis era yet. But I made that comparison, and as I made those tweets, there's sort of a clusterfuck confrontation and argumentation happened in the resulting replies to those two tweets. Lurpus, Stuchu, Thorin, me, and I think like Sadakist or some Sadakist is not getting for a tweet. We're just arguing about these very disparate sort of ideas related to this topic. When does the SK era start? When does the SK era end? When does the Astralis era start? If it started, which I think people aren't ready to start it yet, or to admit that it started. Yeah, I sort of agree with them on that one. I'll get to that later. Or so there's a lot of argumentation. If you can look back at those tweets, it's a multi-layered, multifaceted clusterfuck on that one. And then people talking at completely different times about completely different things. So yeah. And I just sort of realized through looking at that stuff that there's not a clear consensus around the main writers of the game, Suchu, Thorin, and Lurpus, and then, wherever I fit into that, about when does era start and end, and what's the rule for what an era starts and end, and how to set that up. And then there's also other arguments about naming and stuff like that. There's just not a clear, definitive, universally agreed upon criteria or timeline. It's just not existent at this point. And yeah, I know I'm sort of contributing to the problem because I disagree with Thorin's like parody era name and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm just gonna lay down what I think it should be, and I'm inviting anyone inside or outside the names I mentioned to respond or to consider what I'm talking about. So here's what I would put the timeline on. Let's not go back to like 2012. Let's just start at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, and go to present. So here's how I would set the timeline. So I'm not super concerned about whether or not the Fnatic era continued with Dennis or if it broke after Collusion of Poker and Pronex leaving. Okay, like my preference would be to call that a different time period, to call it like that six tournament win streak with Dennis in the lineup now, the Neo Fnatic era or the Renaissance Fnatic era. But that's not super important. That's not a super that's not a big problem because it's still Fnatic. People know when you're talking about that period. But let's define when I think the SK era started. So there was this six tournament run by Fnatic, the Neo Fnatic era, the Renaissance Fnatic era. Now, when does SK era start? I would start it at MLG Columbus and end it at the August player break. Okay. Now, at that, the starting point's pretty obvious to me. That's when they won the major. They won. There's injuries to Olaf, Meister, and Guardian. and Luminosity was like the third best team in the world at the time in sort of the run up to the major. So it was a big surprise they won, but the top two teams were very much handicapped by those injuries. So SKA/Luminosity won that, and they continue to win tournaments or do well. Let's go through their exact record during this period. So first they won Columbus. Then they went out in the group stage at DreamHack Malmo, which started I think 6 days after the major ended. So the obvious assumption there is like Luminosity did not have a sufficient period of time to practice, and maybe not even wanting to practice because they're coming off this high of their major win. But anyway, yeah, they lost that tournament to Mouse Sports and Tyloo. You got to credit those teams, and Luminosity obviously made mistakes there. People like to you have to give credit to that. But anyway, they didn't do well that tournament. But then they have a really good run from there on out. They win ESL Pro League Season 3. Then they go to DreamHack Austin, which is a lesser event. It's like America's only. It's just like Cloud9, Team Liquid, CLG. Splice was there, and that was the famous 1G incident with Splice in the group stage there. But anyway, SK/Luminosity won that tournament over Tempo Storm. Sorry, in the finals, and Tempo Storm, of course, later became Immortals with that sort of same core. But anyway, Tempo Storm was never a top 5 team in the world. This DreamHack Austin win wasn't a super big deal, but they still won the tournament. It's still worth talking about, I guess. And then they went to ECS Season 2, and there they lost to G2 in the finals. And G2 at that time was having that huge spike with Shocks and Scream and RPK going off and having these huge individual sort of performances. Like their aim was just really really on point at that tournament. And before and after that was where I think that was their ultimate peak. But at ESL Pro League and later at the major, they also look good. But like they just sort of they got sort of screwed with that group at the major. But anyway, yeah. So SK/Luminosity lost that final, but still second place, and G2 were peaking, still a very respectable result. And then of course they won ESL Cologne 2016. They beat Liquid in the finals with Liquid had Simple again. But yeah, they won that. So that's sort of they won 4 out of the 6 tournaments. Very good results. The only real stinker is that DreamHack Malmo, right? And I would continue that era until the August player break, because that creates this nice natural breaking point, right? That's there's obviously the Virtus.pro victory at E-League Season 1, but of course SK couldn't be at that tournament because that's whole shenanigans with the with SK and Luminosity and the E-League tournament organizers and that whole shebang. But anyway, yeah, that's when I create the breaking point in my mind, that August player break. And now that's sort of like there's no era in August. It's just like a gap. There's a gap in the time, like a little blank space for me. And then I would start the uncertainty era, starting in September, going until IEM. Well, to E-League Season 2. That's the end point of the uncertainty period. This is uncertainty era. Thorin calls it the parody era. I made another recording where I talk about alternative names to that and the problems of each name. I suggest things like the Discord era, the blank era. But anyway, this period of time, the August player. Well, after the August player break until E-League Season 2. That's sort of the period I'm talking about now. Now, in that period, no team really stood out. Like there's like a different winner to every single tournament. Well, NIP had 2 wins, but that was one with Michael and one with Pyth, so I really don't count that. So let's go through that. So DreamHack Bucharest, VP won. Then at Star Ladder, I-League, Star Series, that super long name that I always mess up. Ninja Pajamas won with Michael. Then we go to ESL 1 New York, and SK's finally back from their extended break after Cologne. Fur had that medical issue, and everyone expected the SK era to continue. People thought they were still in the SK era, but SK never proved to be the best team in the world again. They got in fourth at that tournament. They lost to VP. VP went to the finals. They lost to Na'Vi. That was Na'Vi's one tournament win. Then we go to Epicenter. Dignitas find their one tournament win. They beat VP in the finals. VP played SK in the semifinals. They beat SK. So SK has 2 straight fourths. VP has 2 straight seconds, and they had that Bucharest win. So VP are clearly like the best team of this era, but they're not winning, right? They're not winning that much. And Bucharest was a smaller 8-team tournament, and I think the prize pool for that was only like $100,000. Like, it was actually really low for this period of time we're talking about. This sort of the modern era of prize pools. But anyway, so after Epicenter, which had a big prize pool to talk about at that point again, it went to ESL Pro League Season 4. Now VP, this is the start of November. VP drop out of tournaments, these next 2 tournaments, to prepare for E-League Season 2. And this is where SK becomes the best team in the world in this sort of briefly. They come in second at ESL Pro League Season 4, but actually Cloud9 finds their one tournament win on Brazilian soil. That sort of old storyline, which has sort of gotten hackneyed at this point. But anyway, yeah, they found that win. And then at the very next tournament, IEM Oakland. There's obviously more tournaments like the Northern Arenas and stuff during this time period. I'm trying to talk about like the main premier level tournaments. These are the tournaments I consider premier level during this period of time. And at IEM Oakland, you remember that NIP with Pyth famously won that series versus SK in the finals to take that tournament. So a lot of different winners during this period. That's why I call it the uncertainty era. This sort of team comes out of nowhere. There's all this uncertainty. There's inconsistency in results, and then there's these like record-breaking, well, not record-breaking, but ahistoric or historic results where like new things are happening that's never happened before in the history of CS:GO. NIP wins a tournament with a stand-in. That's the first time that's ever happened, or a tournament of that level. A team's won with that stand-in. That's like that's historic. Then Cloud9 is the first North American team to win a tournament in like a decade, and then Optic later wins E-League Season 2, which is also super surprising. Na'Vi has these up and down results. So there's inconsistency in Na'Vi. Like, this other part is the ahistoric results and the inconsistency. VP's inconsistent if you look at not just the premier level tournaments, but also some of the smaller tournaments like WESG European Finals. So there's inconsistency and this weirdness. That's why I want to call it the uncertainty era. But the natural breaking point to me to end that, even though E-League Season 2 is full of upsets, so I'm tempted to include it. Yeah, I mentioned the Optic thing, which I guess I shouldn't have mentioned because because this is not in the uncertainty era anymore, for my opinion. But that's where I would start the Astralis era, if we are in the Astralis era. Okay, this is a big if. This is an important point to make. I am not arguing that Astralis is in their era right now, because I think, although the results are very similar in quality to SK during their era, during their 6th tournament run during their era, and Astralis' 6th tournament run with Glaive, I don't think they're in their era yet because we still haven't seen enough of these other new teams rising up. The G2s, okay, the other Fnatic, the new Envious. We haven't seen enough from the new North and the new FaZe. So let's not. I agree with the consensus, or what I perceive to be the consensus, that we're not in the Astralis era yet. But I'm putting this is if the Astralis era is to happen, where I want to start is E-League Season 2. Okay, and then I continue that to present. Now, if it doesn't turn out to be the Astralis era, if this other thing happens, okay, Thorn talked about this in comments in a Reddit thread. It was a Stu Chu article, and he was talking about with some guy he was arguing. Now there's a possibility that there's like 8 teams, or like Stucher listed like a bunch of teams. I don't know if the exact number is 8. Like all these teams I mentioned that have a real possibility of like playing at a very high level, very very top heavy scene. A lot of good teams: G2, Astralis, VP, FaZe, North. All these teams, and then Heroic and Gambit sort of outside of that. I think I hit everything. Did I miss one? I guess you have to decide where you want to put Navi in there, but maybe they're about to make a roster change. Okay, who knows with that one? Did I say Fnatic? Oh, I said Fnatic. Even though the first 2 tournaments have gone good, you still don't know what's going to happen with that Fnatic team yet, I think. So anyway, yeah, so if Astralis' era doesn't happen, if that doesn't come into fruition, where are we still in the uncertainty era? Now, I actually think I'd still make the break. Now, if that was the case, if we're not in the Astralis era currently, and that there's going to be this new era of parity between all these great teams or great looking teams, what Thorne's suggestion was to do is to separate it into like call this new era the greater uncertainty era or something like this. I think that's fine. And calling his parity era, my uncertainty era, like the lesser parity era, like that's fine to me. That sounds perfectly reasonable. But that's where I draw the lines. Like okay. If Astralis doesn't earn the era, the line for the greater lesser parity era would be after the major, because that's when all the roster change happened. But if Astralis era is now, I would start it at E-League Season 2. Okay, so that's where I draw the lines for all the eras, right? So here's my philosophy. So this is how I decide when to decide when a new era starts and ends. Imagine this scenario in your mind. This is sort of my thinking about it. This is how I decided on this. Say Team A wins four tournaments, and Team B comes in second place at the same 4 tournaments. At the fifth and then at the fifth tournament, Team B beats Team A in the finals, and they get first place, and Team A gets second place. Now, if you're looking at it from like a top-down perspective, like from the perspective of like creating a rating system, you'd still think Team A is the best team in the world, because 4 out of those 5 results, Team A is better than Team B, right? But say that pattern continues and Team B keeps beating Team A at tournament after tournament, and they play 4 more tournaments after tournament 5. So tournaments 1 through 9, right? So 1 through 4, Team A wins, but 5 through 9, Team B wins. Now, if you look at it like that, it's clear that Team A becomes worse than Team B after tournament 4. But if you actually think about it like from a rating, from like creating like a who's the best team in the world right now perspective, like a Thorne's ranking system or HLTV system or a numerical rating system, I think you'd only change who's the best team or who's the better team after tournament 8. At tournament 8, it's a tie, because at tournament 8, Team A has 4 wins and Team B has 4 wins, and the other teams have seconds, right? Well, the opposite team has seconds. So that's when the records equal at tournament 8, and only tournament 9 does Team B become the best team in the world, clearly by results. If this all happened over a relevant time period, right? So if this all happened, these 9 tournaments happened over 3 months, right? Or a relevant time, whatever you decide a relevant time period to be, and you include all these ratings in your time period. So if you only just go by when a team is clearly the best team in the world, it's way later than when they actually become, like, if you look retrospectively, when they become the best team in the world. So the way I think it should be done is when you retrospectively acknowledge that this team has surpassed all other teams. So where I want to start eras is not at tournament 9, but at tournament 5, when Team B clearly exceeds Team A and all the other and B and C and D and E and all the other teams participating at these imaginary tournaments. So that's why SK's era I would start at MLG Columbus, because from that point forward, I would say if you look at those results, that group of results in the aftermath, that's when SK takes the crown of best team in the world. Now, what's confusing is afterwards there's not a clear breakoff point because no team clearly becomes the best team in the world after Astralis. There's the uncertainty era. There's this back and forth. Now, VP's results are better than SK's in that September through October period in the start of the uncertainty era, but no one's calling for that to be called the VP era. They're just not dominant enough. I think that's part of this understanding of the eras, that the team has to be very dominant, so you immediately associate the team with the time period. So this is very important. This is why I think Astralis hasn't been given the title, the nomenclature. It hasn't been given the Astralis era yet. Not quite yet. I think we're a couple tournaments away. We'll see. We'll see how that one plays out when there's that sort of consensus acknowledgement that we're in the Astralis era. But anyway, if it happens, of course. Okay, but anyway, so the question then, using this guideline, when does Astralis become the best team in the world if they do earn their era? Where if Astralis does earn their era, where would you start? When do they become the best team in the world? I wouldn't start at IEM Oakland because I would give SK like the best team in the world status at those two November tournaments, IEM Oakland and ESL Pro League Season 3 or Season 4, I mean, because they got the 2 seconds. But I would say there's no better team in the world than Astralis from E-League onwards. Even though they got second at E-League Season 2, Optic beat them, Astralis definitely proved to be the better team over the following period, right? Because they beat Optic at ECS Season 2, won the major, and okay, onwards there, we know the results. So that's where I'd start the period for Astralis. Now, Lurpus specifically said he wouldn't start that period because they didn't get first. Okay, that's up to him. Okay, but he can lay out his, or anyone else. Anyone else can divine their own rules, but that's where I'd start via what I think it should be, and we go to the present. Now, if Astralis don't earn their era, then you sort of have to divide the two eras, the two parity eras, the two uncertainty eras, or whatever those two eras are going to be called, based on roster changes. I think that makes sense. So that's my general theory. That's my understanding. And as I said before, if anyone wants to define their own rule set or create their own timeline, I am completely, of course, I don't have any control whether someone makes it or not, but yeah, I'm interested in the content. I want this discussion to be ironed out because I do think there's this real confusion. So when one person, one writer, or one analyst talks about the start of the Astralis era, if that happens, it should be understood. Let's figure this out. I mean, it's confusing right now because there's all that parity, all that uncertainty in the post-August sort of time period. But let's now that sort of Astralis is taking over and we've entered a new period of time, let's sort of figure it out exactly when each team ended and started their era. Let's create some rules. I want some understanding on that front. Okay, thank you.